And to those of you who, sorry, we'll start again because the recording just started. Welcome to all of you who are attending this session and who will be joining us if you're not here already. We want to thank you for spending your early afternoon with us. We understand it's the lunch hour, so for those of you who may need to eat, please feel free to do that during the presentation. My name is Phyllis Jacobson. I'm an administrator with the Professional Services Division of the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. My major focus these last couple of years has been on the early childhood education and on helping to transform preparation for this workforce. With me in this work and in this presentation today are Dr. Debbie Keeler, who is a consultant with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing, as well as Dr. June Milovich, who is also working with us, although she doesn't belong to us. She belongs to a community college that she works for, and also she works with the CAP project. So for today's presentation, next slide, please.
I am, one second, we'll work on going to the next slide. I lost my controls for 1 second. There we go.
Thank you. So we thought we'd tell you a little bit about the commission. We are aware that some of you may not have interacted very much with us. So just to give you some context for our work, the commission is the oldest independent professional standards board in the nation. There are about 17 states that have independent professional standards boards that are not part of the state's education department. The commission is the agency in state government that sets standards and issues licenses for teachers, administrators, counselors, and others who work in California's public schools. We do focus on preparation and licensing for the ECE workforce, although it's primarily for those who are serving in Title V preschool programs and settings. We accredit all educator preparation programs for credentials, but until this present time, we have not accredited preparation programs for the child development permit. We are doing some work in that direction, which you will hear about in a bit from June. Our commissioners are appointed by the governor, and they include teachers and administrators and higher education faculty, as well as members of the general public. Next slide, please. We do have some very specific responsibilities under the California Education Code, and these are in 5 primary areas. We are required to develop and implement credential-specific licensure standards for all educators in California public schools, and that does include the Title V preschool programs. We are required to develop and adopt program quality standards for all credentials and permits. We are required to develop and implement educator preparation assessments, which are known as performance assessments, and you're going to be hearing a little bit about our ECE-related work in that area. We are also responsible for the discipline of all educators who hold a license or permit. Should these educators do something that they ought not to have done, then we do have authority for discipline. And then we are also responsible for the accreditation of higher education and other programs that prepare California educators. Next slide, please. So we thought it might be helpful to distinguish between what we do as compared to what the CDE does. So the commission has authority over the pre-service preparation prior to earning a child development permit, whereas the CDE has authority over in-service professional development once someone holds a permit from the commission. The commission has authority over the preparation requirements for what it takes to earn a child development permit, whereas the CDE has authority over the requirements and the quality of the programs and settings that actually serve the young children. And the commission has authority over the quality of ECE preparation programs that are provided to candidates for a permit, whereas the CDE funds and has authority over the Title V preschool programs themselves. Next slide. Thank you. So the commission has long been involved in ECE work, although you may not have been aware of it. Way back, it seems like a long time ago, in 2015, there was this landmark national report called Transforming the Workforce Birth Through 8. And that report inspired California to form its own statewide interagency task force and develop an implementation plan for transforming preparation and licensure. As part of that work, we had a child development permit advisory panel that some of you listening to this presentation may well have participated in or on. And that permit advisory panel was to review and make recommendations for updating the child development permit. As you may be aware, that structure has not been changed since the early 90s. In 2019, the Commission developed and adopted a brand new set of performance expectations or competencies for all levels of the permit, as well as program quality standards for those who prepare this workforce. In 2020, the Master Plan for Early Learning and Care was issued. And that's a major reason why the recommendations from the Child Development Advisory Panel were tabled. We knew that there was going to be a new statewide plan, and we wanted to make sure that our work would be consistent with that. And so that is why the recommendations were tabled, but they are going to be moving forward, as you will hear in this presentation. And then in 2021, with support from the Preschool Development Grant-Renewal funds, the Commission began designing and is in the middle of piloting a program review and approval process for preparation leading to the child development permit. And we are also developing a formative, and I emphasize the word formative at the time being, formative performance assessment for child development permit teacher level candidates. Next slide, please. So we've been at this for quite a while, and most of you are familiar, or in fact, very familiar with the child development permit and its structure. As you know, there are 6 levels of the matrix. One of these levels is also consistent with Title 22 requirements. The requirements do build from one level to the next and thus reflect a career ladder, which is required by statute. There are also options for earning each level of the permit that reflect what we call a career lattice, so that people can enter and move forward with multiple options for doing that. The structure of the permit focuses primarily on service in center-based Title V programs, but each level of the permit authorizes a specific set of activities for the care, development, and instruction of young children in a variety of settings. The next 2 slides, which June will put briefly on the screen, remind you of what the child development permit structure looks like, so that there is a permit level. There are various routes to get to that permit. There are some alternative routes, and there are 5-year renewal responsibilities. And you see the first 3 levels here. And on the next slide, there are the remaining levels, which are, both of these are administrator levels. So as far as credentials, on the next slide, please, as far as credentials that the Commission has available to issue that would authorize service in center-based child care and development centers, as well as in TK. At the present time, this is the array. There is a child development permit. We've just talked about that, and most of you are more than familiar with it. There is an early childhood special education credential. That credential authorizes service for infants and preschool, and includes focused preparation on meeting the needs of young children who have special needs. There is a multiple subject credential that authorizes service from preschool through adult education, although we acknowledge that the multiple subject preparation is only minimally focused on the very earliest years. And in the array of these credentials, there is not a separate credential per se, but for teaching transitional kindergarten, under Education Code Section 48,000 sub G, a multiple subject credential holder who completes an additional 24 units of ECE coursework or the equivalent may teach in TK programs, provided that this individual completes this requirement by the year 2023. And last but not least, there is an early childhood specialist credential. This credential is currently available, but as an add-on to a multiple subject credential. It is not a separate credential in and of itself. This credential currently only has 1 program in existence that is a preparation program, And over the last 5 years, there have only been, I believe, 10 individuals who've gotten this particular credential. So those are the credentials that are currently established in law that the commission can issue relative to serving in child-based care and development centers. Next slide, please. So now we come to the meat of the matter, and that is, what are we doing to change? How is the system being reformed and updated? Well, the master plan, as you know, is our inspiration and is providing us direction. And within that direction, the commission's responsibilities are primarily under the workforce goal number 2, and that is a workforce development. So on the next slide, you'll see what that goal looks like. So there are 4 goals in the master plan: programs, workforce funding, and governance. And under goal 2, which we've enhanced for you to focus on where we are operating, is to support children's learning and development by enhancing educator competencies, incentivizing career pathways, and implementing supportive program standards. The next slide will show you what they mean by workforce competencies. They're talking about revising workforce standards to reflect the competencies the workforce needs to support optimal child development and learning. And that includes not only child development, but learning environments, responsive interactions, observations and assessments, understanding the needs and the assets of children with who are dual language learners, who may have disabilities, and who may be experiencing trauma, as well as family engagement in all of these processes. And we're also talking about multiple entry points and pathways to the career and moving forward in the career, and program standards to help support the effectiveness of the preparation provided. And now Debbie is going to talk to you about the Commission's major responsibilities within the master plan.
Thank you, Phyllis. So when we look at the major responsibilities in relationship to the master plan and workforce development, we're focusing on 3 main areas. The first area is to look at developing and implementing a competency-based approach to the workforce preparation in relationship to licensure. So we'll talk a little bit in a moment about what does that competency-based approach look like. The second area is really focusing on that quality control system for the ECE workforce in terms of preparation, working with prep programs, institutions of higher education, which is very likened to accreditation. And then the third main area is to look at maintaining and supporting a career ladder and career lattice for those in the workforce in relationship to them being able to advance. So next slide, please. All right. And so we have transforming the preparation and licensure of the early childhood workforce. And I'm going to ask June if she can take over this slide for a moment.
I'd be happy to. I had to unmute myself in 2 places. 1 second. I hear an echo when I speak. Is anyone
You're
here?
clear, June.
I'm clear.
You're
Beautiful.
okay.
I hear the echo.
See what I can do about that. Let's see, much better. So the commission is working with the field to help really transform how early childhood preparation and occurs, moving from where currently in the permit we check off courses like looking at transcripts and moving to a competency-based system of preparation, assessment, and then with licensure. And this would be consistent with the Learning to Teach continuum. Phyllis hasn't shared that yet in this particular slideshow, but anyone who has attended the Commission on Teacher Credentialing pilot webinars that occurred in the fall, it was a very present feature there.
Thank you, June. All right, so we look at building tools for the future and aligning with the master plan direction. First of all, we want to consider the California's Preschool Development Grant-Renewal program, the PDG-R, and how that enables the commission to work on developing a new child development permit teaching performance assessment, which we'll talk about in a moment. The PDG-R grant is also supporting the development of a program review and approval process, which was the one of the second initiatives of the commission for including preparation of the child development permit workforce in the state's accreditation system. And these tools are being developed collaboratively over the next 3 years. Next slide, please. So let's look at what are the elements of a competency-based system in relationship to preparation and licensing for the child development permit. So this involves a system including 3 fundamental building blocks. First one is the performance expectations, which helps others know how the candidate is developing in their knowledge and skills or competencies for that beginner practitioner needing to demonstrate effectiveness for job performance. And then we look at program standards. What are those quality expectations for preparation leading to a child development permit program? And that performance assessment, which we'll talk about as well, which is a tool that allows prospective child development permit holders or teachers and possibly other ECE professionals to really be able to demonstrate their competency and readiness for working effectively with children as they enter the workforce. Next slide, please. So the benefits to a competency-based system, first of all, it can provide a common set of expectations, which are job-related competencies for teachers and other ECE professionals in the field, working with young children across all ECE programs and individual settings. It can also provide entry points, various entry points to the child development permit system, and multiple ways and pathways to access the career ladder and career lattices. We can also look at competency-based systems, looking at providing a means for teachers and other ECE professionals to look at their job performance in relationship to these competencies and be able to recognize their strengths and how they are performing well as areas that they need to continue to advance and grow in their professional development. We also look at providing a common set of statewide quality criteria for post-secondary institutions that are preparing teachers for the ECE workforce and professionals working with young children, and that's across multiple ECE settings. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Debbie.
Thank you.
So I'd like to go back for a second and talk some more about performance expectations or competencies. I can almost hear all of you saying, well, wait a minute, don't we already have quite a number of these in the field? Why do we need yet another set? Well, from the Commission's point of view, performance expectations represent job-related statements of essential knowledge, skills, and abilities that candidates for permit should need to demonstrate. We recognize that there are a whole other group of competencies out there. There's the competencies suggested by the Transforming the Workforce Birth Through 8 report. There are the extensive, wonderful, detailed sets of competencies that were developed by the California Department of Education. There are competencies developed by NAEYC. But for the Commission's purposes, we are looking for a manageable set that could serve as the basis for both the permit and for developing a performance assessment. Candidates need something that is more manageable for them to get a clear idea of what does this profession involve before they delve into all of the intricate competencies that make up this broader grouping. And they find those in the CDE competencies. So these documents work very well together. They're not opposing sets of competencies. But the Commission's competencies are organized into broader and more manageable and interrelated groups of competencies so that programs can design coursework around these and make sure that their curriculum addresses everything that's needed. The performance expectations that the Commission has developed are intended to be at the level of what we call a beginning practitioner. This is someone just ready to step on that threshold and begin their professional practice with young children. These are not expectations for accomplished professional practice after you've been a veteran for a number of years. Next slide, please. So what's some examples of the kind of content that are included in the performance expectations for early childhood teachers? So here is an excerpt from the TPE number 1, and you'll notice that it mentions such things that as teachers are knowledgeable about the progression of young children's cognitive development. That's an important area. They need to be cognizant of how social emotional skills develop and can be enhanced and supported. They need to know about first and dual language development, literacy, mathematics, and other such content areas that may be part of what's covered during the day. They need to be knowledgeable about physical development and mental and emotional and physical health. They need to understand the home role of the family in the development of learning of their children and the importance of working collaboratively in partnerships with families. So what you notice about these things is that each one of these is a summary of quite a number of underlying competencies that you need to get to this one. Now, this is an illustration of what we mean by these are a broad, manageable set as opposed to being at the level of detail of some of the other sets of performance expectations. Next slide, please. So Debbie also mentioned that we're working as part of our competency-based system on program standards. And these are the standards of quality and effectiveness that we use for accreditation purposes to help us and the program understand how well it is helping candidates to meet the expectations that we have for them. So we are helping the program to look at whether the curriculum reflects learning how to understand, practice, and get feedback on the performance assessment, the performance expectations. And we're also helping to look at where and how they provide clinical experiences so that candidates can practice these in either an actual or a virtual setting so that they can gain that needed experience. Next slide, please. And so the third leg of our stool here, we've got performance expectations, we've got program standards, and we have a performance assessment. A performance assessment is an assessment that allows candidates to demonstrate with actual children, either live or virtual, to demonstrate that they have those competencies needed in order to perform the job role of a preschool or early childhood teacher. And the idea of job role is what's really important here. We want to focus on what it is they actually do during their day-to-day experiences in the setting with young children, with their colleagues, with other adults in the setting, and with families. And so we've structured these assessments so that candidates can get focused feedback regarding their areas of relative strength and areas for targeted improvement. The performance assessment is typically embedded in coursework and field experiences. We do not envision this at all as a separate examination where candidates have to go off and pay some fee and take some assessment in some center. This is not what that is at all. It's an integral part of their life in coursework and in developing into a beginning professional. And last but not least, the performance assessment results can provide feedback to preparation programs to help them strengthen and improve. If, for example, a preparation program sees that their candidates are just not really being very effective in communicating well with families, then they can focus more efforts in that area. That's just an example. So let's take a closer look at a performance assessment. And I will say that this is really close because this is kind of tiny print, but we know that you will be getting a copy of this that you can see for yourselves. And so a performance assessment might have some specific tasks that the candidate has to do. So maybe their first task is to learn about the children in their preschool class. What is the children's background? What is the culture? What is their language? What is their physical and social emotional health status? What assets do they bring to their learning context? What's the context for the family? What learning goals do the families have for the children? What are the learning needs of these young children? And any other relevant information to help the teacher think about how best to help these children grow and develop. And then the candidate would plan child-initiated, teacher-directed or led activities, combinations of these things. They would collaborate with the family to support the child. They would implement their learning plans. They would gather evidence of the children's growth and development as a result of the interactions they've had with the children. And they would then analyze that for future planning and for supporting future child and family interactions. They submit their various evidence pieces, that these could be including their thoughts about how they planned, their actual plans, some evidence of the children's work, or work may seem like an odd word in this context, but what the children have produced or done as part of the activities to demonstrate that they have either achieved what they intended, or they could correctly analyze what didn't go the way I thought it was going to go, and what am I going to do about it? And then they receive feedback on each of these rubrics, these scoring rubrics, that give them a direction for their own future growth and development. Right now, we're envisioning this as a formative activity so that everyone in the system gets feedback. So the Commission has a lot of experience with performance assessments. We have been implementing a teaching performance assessment as a requirement for all preliminary teacher credential candidates since 98? No, since, gosh, I forget, it's been so long. I think it's 2008, sorry. 2008 was the year that it went into state law as a requirement for getting a preliminary credential. We've been administering the Cal APA, which is the Administrative Performance Assessment for administrative services candidates now for several years. We are currently developing a brand new teaching performance assessment for education specialists, that is special education teacher candidates. And we are also working right now on developing an ECE teaching performance assessment that is built at the level of the teacher permit for child development candidates. We have a design team that's working on building that. And as part of this, excuse me, as part of this work, we're going to ask Debbie to talk with us about how the Commission is working with the field.
Phyllis, so the question is, how is the Commission on Teacher Credentialing working with the field in that competency-based preparation work? So the focus, the things that we're doing right now are looking at implementing the 4 ECE pilots that are currently in process. So pilot 1 looks at the ECE preparation program and moving forward towards implementing the TPE aligned curriculum for the teacher level of the child permit. So institutions that are participating in pilot 1 are in the process of implementing that aligned curriculum or beginning that process over the next couple of years. In pilot 2, it's looking at those ECE preparation programs, moving forward with the alignment with the adopted program guidelines, which are our ECE standards. And so institutions are, again, in process or beginning that process within the next couple of years. Pilot 3 really focuses on preparation programs that are willing to try out the ECE TPA tasks as a part of their performance assessment with the teacher level candidates. So institutions have an opportunity to jump in and try out those ECE TPAs. And pilot 4 is focused on those ECE preparation programs that are trying out the new peer review process, which we'll share with you shortly, that including using the TPA data and providing feedback regarding the process so that as we're going through this pilot period, that we can get feedback and then look at what are those modifications or changes that we need to make in the future. All right, next slide, please. So again, looking at how the CTC is working with the field in that preparation program, as a part of pilot 4, we have designed 2 collaborative teams that are helping to design the teaching performance assessment and that program quality peer review accreditation process. Both design teams were appointed after an open application process. And each one of these design teams include ECE experienced professionals, practitioners in the field, ECE preparation program faculty, 2 representation from 2- and 4-year post-secondary institutions. We have other ECE content experts, example, those that have worked on the CAP project, PEACH, and other collaborative entities. And we have liaisons and observers from other agencies and organizations. And so those design teams are underway. And the program quality peer review design team has come up with a draft of what that process will look like. And so I'm going to hand it over to June.
Hi there, and I see some familiar faces of those of you who actually are on one or the other of those design teams. So welcome, and pop in the chat if there's something that you would like to add to our description. So the quality peer review design team, over a series of meetings, came up with a draft of a new peer review system. And so this is designed specifically for ECE preparation programs. As you know, the Commission already has some existing accreditation processes for K-12 systems, but this is really designed to meet the unique needs of early childhood preparation programs. And to start off thinking about what that would entail, the design team looked at and then ultimately adopted elements from some already existing accreditation systems. Many of you might be familiar with NAEYC, Higher Education Accreditation Program, the Commission's accreditation. And if for any of you who were K-12 teachers in the field and participated or ever heard of BITSA, the Beginning Teacher Support and Assessment process, you know, there were some unique features of that related to kind of a community of practice peer-to-peer discussion. And so what the design team suggested, recommended, came up with was sort of a blending of those, and underlying each step of the thought process was that whatever got developed needed to be equitable. It needed to provide access and equitable at the level of the preparation program, equal access and participation, depending on, you know, even if there was only 1 faculty, or if there were 6 faculty, or if it was a rural program, an urban program, or, you know, many students or few students. We wanted to make sure that the peer review process would work for everyone. And that the other really key underlying feature was that it relies on peer support, colleagues from other early childhood preparation programs who are the kind of the guides and the reviewers of programs, presentations of themselves. And the results of the process then will result in an accreditation recommendation to CTC's Committee on Accreditation, also known as the COA. And that the cycle would happen across 7 years. And so that's similar to the K-12 cycles, the length of the K-12 cycle. And so here, this might be a little bit easier to, here's a graphic that sort of explains that process, and I'll kind of walk you around the wheel here. So central to the process is the self-study. And so, which is developed and refined, and you can see this would happen in stage 1, the red part of the graphic there. And so this is developed and refined by the preparation program kind of across the first two stages, and it's reviewed for approval consideration in the third and fourth stages. So in the initial self-study development, programs will be guided by a suggested template, which will be shared with them. Of course, there will be an orientation to that process. And it's anticipated that each program self-study will uniquely represent the characteristics and the philosophies of the individual programs who are applying. We know that programs do things differently, and that's okay. And so the self-study will be where those unique differences have an opportunity to show themselves. Preparation programs will also be encouraged to use as much of the existing data, the things that they already have to collect in the process of their own program reviews locally at their institutions, and use as much of that existing data so that we're not tremendously increasing the workload on faculty, because we all know not only do probably everyone in this meeting wear many hats, but there's just a lot of work involved in running an early childhood education preparation program. So trying to minimize that workload by using as many things that are existing. Examples might be the student learning outcomes that are already collected for campus's own reasons, or feedback from students and alumni or advisory groups, descriptions of practicum placements or supervising teachers. So the self-study would also include the preparation program's own reflection on the degree to which it sees itself meeting the Commission's adopted ECE program guidelines. And we didn't outline those in this presentation, but there are 6 of them. And they are easily accessible on Commission's website on the ECE education page. Debbie might be able to put the link to those in the chat while I'm speaking here. And so then with a completed initial self-study, the programs move on to the second component here. And in this step, they would be paired with another preparation program working along similar lines. And so this would be their opportunity to use what's learned through this peer-to-peer discussion to refine and finalize their self-study for the next step, which is a peer review and virtual site visit. So here in step 3, peer reviewers who would have completed specialized training for their roles would review the program self-study and conduct the site visit, virtual site visit. And that's their opportunity to hear firsthand from program staff, other faculty or students, others in that program about their experiences in that particular program. And then in preparation for the 4th step, the approval and continuous improvement cycle, the peer review team would come to a decision, a consensus decision on a program recommendation status. So there could be approval with conditions, or not approved. And approved programs can then directly recommend candidates to Commission on Teacher Credentialing for their permit. And then once they are approved, also they would also begin their ongoing improvement cycle, which again, and then a number of years later, they would restart this cycle. In the meantime, they would collect annual data for their own improvement purposes. And programs with any identified conditions that needed to be met would be revisited within a specific period of time and supported by the Commission. And it is envisioned that when and if this takes place, it would happen over a 7-year cycle. Hopefully that doesn't, the length of time also can help not have the workload all landing in one place. And so the next steps for this, it was this same graphic, a very similar presentation was presented to the Commission at their meeting in early August. And piloting will actually begin this fall, which for many of us, that's like Monday, but the piloting won't begin Monday, but this fall with just a few institutions, because the full process is not completely fleshed out, but we just want to, almost like in a focus group situation, make sure that even the design of the self-study template and things like those are working efficiently and appropriately as we had intended. And then information from the pilot program's experiences, the early pilot, the kind of the pre-pilot experiences, will be analyzed by the peer review design team. for any potential modifications that might need to be made, and then they would report back to the commission at a later date. And so I will hand back over to Phyllis for a little update on any other CTC work that's on the horizon.
Thank you, June. So yes, we are very busy, as all of the rest of you are, and we do have some important and exciting work on the horizon in addition to all of the work under the PDG-R grant that you've heard about in this presentation. So these are not in any particular order of importance. They are a list of things that we are going to be working on. So one of these is looking more closely at the requirements for teaching transitional kindergarten. We see this as collaborative work with the California Department of Education and other stakeholders in the ECE community. The commission always works collaboratively with stakeholders. We don't do any of this work by ourselves when it involves the field. We try to reach out and to involve the field as much as possible. So you may be aware that there are actually 3 options existing in law for meeting the requirements to teach transitional kindergarten. These are specified in Education Code 48,000 sub G, for those of you who like to read the education code, but I'll tell you what they are in shorthand. One of the options is to earn 24 units in early childhood education. The law does not specify what the content of those units has to be at this point in time. And those units can be earned through any institution of higher education that offers ECE preparation and coursework. I should say any regionally accredited institution of higher education. That would include community colleges and the 4-year institutions. The second way that a teacher can meet these transitional kindergarten requirements is to hold a child development teacher permit from the commission, because that automatically includes 24 ECE units as a base requirement for holding that permit. And then the third way is through the employer doing an equivalency evaluation of someone who has equivalent experience in teaching in the TK space. And that's up to the employer to conduct that particular sort of evaluation. So we will be looking more closely at these requirements and how these are being implemented in the field as part of our upcoming work. We also do plan to update the child development permit matrix, as well as the options for meeting the permit requirements. There was a question about that in the chat, and I provided an answer in there as well. The commission will be hearing an agenda item at its October meeting regarding both the transitional kindergarten work and the updating the child development permit matrix and structure plans. The public is welcome to attend these virtual meetings. There's information on the website about how you can attend these meetings and watch them live and make comments to the commission should you wish to do so. We also encourage you to look at agenda item 3D from the August commission meeting, because that's where we laid out all of the work we've talked to you about today in much more detail. And then we will also be looking to build multiple entry points to the permit structure as well for other types of ECE providers. We want to broaden the opportunities for people in the field to become part of the permit structure and to move forward in that structure. And as part of that work, we're looking at building bridges from the permit structure to the multiple subject credential, as well as to teaching TK for career ladder and career lattice purposes. And we will, of course, be working on moving forward with, if not completing, the ECE teaching performance assessment and the peer review program approval pilots over the next 2 years. Our funding for the PDG-R grant runs out in December of 22, so we're hopeful of getting most of our piloting accomplished by that point in time. And as Jean just gave you a preview on the last slide for this presentation, which you will be having an opportunity to get for yourselves when the meeting materials are posted, we've given you some helpful contact information. We do have a dedicated mailbox for early childhood education. You can send any of your questions, comments, concerns, and so on to our ECE mailbox. We have a dedicated webpage, which Debra also put for you in the chat. We have a monthly ECE news update, which you can subscribe yourself to. And we ask also that if you do subscribe to this, if your address changes, if you would please go in and update that, because it's very difficult for us to change those addresses. So if you have subscribed and need to change your address, please unsubscribe and then resubscribe with your new address. We have a dedicated mailbox if you have permit-related credentialing questions. That's our certification division. It's credentials@ctc.ca.gov. We offer 2 opportunities for ECE virtual office hours when you can just drop by and chat with us and get a question answered, or just hang out with us if that's what you'd like to do. That's on the 1st and 3rd Tuesdays of the month from 12 to 1. We understand it's your lunchtime, so you're welcome to eat. If you want to drop in with us, that's fine with us. And that concludes our presentation. We've tried to answer some of the questions in the chat when we've had the opportunity. But if you have additional questions, we welcome those now. I think June is trying to monitor if anybody raises their hand or would like to ask a question.
I do not see
Where
any.
can we locate the proposed changes to the child development permit matrix? At the moment, there are no official proposed changes to the CD permit, child development permit matrix. There are the recommendations that were made by the Child Development Permit Advisory Panel. Those are provided in several agenda items that are available on the Commission's website. Off the top of my head, I can't tell you which ones, but I think the most recent one would have been February of 21. I believe we had an update agenda item in February of 21 that listed those in an appendix. But if you search on the Commission's website for the Child Development Permit Advisory Panel, if you also go to the Child Development dedicated webpage that Debbie has put the link to, we believe that there is a link there to information about the work of that Child Development Permit Advisory Panel from 2015 to 17.
It's all the way at the bottom of the page. Just scroll all the way down and the bar and the link is there.
Some of those materials may have been archived subsequently, but there is a way to get them back if you make a request for those. But the February 21 agenda items should be still available for you to look at. And I believe it's an appendix to that agenda item. No other questions?
I don't see any.
No? Okay. Well, then we will thank you all for your attendance. Oh, well, wait, here's another one. How well are the ECETPs aligned with master plan recommendations? The master plan itself does not go into detail about specific competencies. They leave that to the Commission as part of the work in early childhood education. I know several people have asked, are they going to be updated? We always are looking at the potential for updating teaching performance expectations as time evolves and viewpoints evolve. Part of the issue in updating those is that they also serve as the basis for other interrelated work. Right now, for example, we have the design team, which is working on the ECE teaching performance assessment, and their work is based on the TPEs as they presently are formulated. And so any changes that we make would also affect work down the line. And so we look at that very carefully. That is not to say that we will never change teaching performance expectations. We will change those at appropriate times when it becomes necessary to do so. We have changed them to update them to include social emotional learning, trauma-informed practice, things like that as these new areas come along. We've been looking at them for updating for equity and related purposes. We try to be as current as we can, also understanding that it also affects a whole bunch of other interrelated work. Oh yes, very important. Thank you very much, Mary, for putting this in the chat. How could we forget to mention permit application fees are waived for 1 year Yes, thank you so much. I can't believe I didn't mention that. This current year, through the budget, application fees, including child development permit fees, first-time fees, are being waived. Please note that this does not include renewal of permit fees. It is a first-time application fee. So if you have some people who have been holding off applying for the permit for monetary or fiscal reasons, they can go ahead and apply for those permits, and they will not have to pay a fee for this year. Several people mentioned, I believe, in some of the other sessions that we were listening to today about the grant programs that may be helpful for teacher permit or any other permit candidate to enter the educational system or to move up in the educational system towards their intended career goal. We are super excited about this. I myself have been associated with all of these programs in the past as a director of these programs. I've worked on them with the commission and for the commission. We pushed very, very, very hard to make sure that early childhood candidates could be included in these grant programs because they have not been eligible in the past. So we're super excited about this. We caution a little bit of patience, however, because it takes an enormous amount of effort to get out these requests for proposals and get the process working so that new programs can be implemented. And as you know, the school districts and the county offices of education and the institutions of higher ed that would be applying to operate these programs are super impacted right now as well. So we have high expectations, but a little bit of caution about the speed at which we can move this process through. Right, well, seeing no further, we thank you very much for staying with us during this presentation. We are happy to communicate with you in any of your chosen formats. And we appreciate your attendance here today. Let us know how we can help support you.